Now, according to other witnesses, Tedford was one of 14 passengers on the bus at the last stop before arriving to Bennington. And somehow, between the last stop in Bennington, Tedford vanished. Like, vanished off the bus. What's up, you guys? Yo, welcome back to my channel. I appreciate you guys' time, and I do understand how valuable it is. So hopefully I don't waste you guys' time with this particular story. Now, this story is somewhere where you shouldn't go, or you just shouldn't get stranded. If you're ever traveling to and out of Vermont, or if you ever live in Vermont, you probably heard these stories. But if you haven't, just brace yourself. If you guys like storytelling, if you like to hear something strange and amazing, astonishing, or whatnot, then hit your boy up with a like. And if you didn't know and you find yourself at the end of this video, then obviously you like it. So subscribe. It helps. It'll go a long way. Really, swear to God. Now, I'm pretty sure every one of us has heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but I bet you guys didn't know it had a cousin. And I know it's geography. I understand it's a land. But have you guys ever heard of the Bennington Triangle? You see, most people haven't. In fact, it is legally a ghost town. And I get to that in a little bit later on in the video. But for now, sit back and relax. Go get your cousin, auntie, or whoever you want, because I'm about to tell you some stories or folklore that surrounds this particular area. And by the end of this video, you just may agree and sound silly to think that the Bermuda Triangle has a cousin. The Bennington Triangle is in the middle of the Glattenberry Mountains, and that's in the Bennington County in Vermont. It's made up of the towns of Bennington, Woodford, and Staffberry. And inside that triangle house the town of Glattenberry in Somerset. The Glattenberry Mountain is part of the Green Mountain National Forest, and the Long Trail Road is part of the Appalachian Trail that runs the entire length of the state, and it passes right over the tippy top of the Glattenberry Mountains. And we'll talk a bit more about the Long Trail Road the more as this story goes on. Glattenberry and Somerset were both thriving tourist and industrial towns, but began declining as quickly as it rose in the year of 1997. And at the end, a flood washed away all the roads, the railroad lines, and the bridges in 1998. And after that, the towns just never recovered. And like I said, essentially ghost towns due to the Vermont General Assembly Act in 1937, leaving it an unincorporated area. And for those of you guys who don't know what an unincorporated area is, it is simply a region that is not governed by any local municipal corporation. So no laws, no people for that matter. It's like Mad Max, but not Mad Max. Yeah. And for years, numerous sightings of this Bigfoot-like creature of the Glattenberry Mountains would be published and talked about, and became known as the Bennington Monster. And one of these first reported sightings of the monster happened in early 1800s, when a bus full of passengers was forced to stop on a washed out road when the driver first noticed these very large footprints in the mud. And at first, they looked like humans, but they were just too large to be a normal human. And now the passengers are getting up out their seats, and they're starting to look around to see if they see anything, but they couldn't. And then eventually the bus was attacked, and whatever this creature was doing, it was just really just trying to claw its way inside the bus, and whatever it does after that. And given the time of the day and the height of the bus, the passengers couldn't really make out exactly what this thing was, and being afraid and not being able to send anyone for help, they just had to sit and wait in suspense and terror for whatever the situation was to pass. And after a couple of moments, the monster would eventually leave, but not until it knocked the bus on its side. And the frightened passenger said At that time, they couldn't see nothing but a glowing pair of eyes before this monster just roared and ran into the forest. And not only does this place have those stories of Bigfoot, it also has weird things happening like UFO sightings, strange noises, strange light shows, and also a number of disappearances in the span of 7 years. And according to Native American folklore, this area was cursed and they were always told to avoid it at all costs. And along with that, it was an old legend that warned people of a malevolent stone in the mountains that would just open up and devour anyone unlucky enough to step on it. The first known disappearance happened in 1943. A man named Carl Herrick went missing during a hunting trip around 10 miles northeast of Glattenbury, and his body was discovered about 3 days later, surrounded by these huge, mysterious footprints, and it looked as if he had been squeezed to death. And on November 12, 1945, a 74-year-old man named Mitty Rivers disappeared while on a hunting trip with a group of hunters. Now, Mitty guided the group of 4 hunters up the Glattenbury Mountain to an area called Hale Hollow. And as the group was stationary, Rivers just walked away from the group, and no one really knew why he did it. But initially, the hunters, they wouldn't really concern. I mean, after all, he was their guide. Some time would go by, and Mitty didn't return to the group. And the rest of the hunters got up and they just searched the immediate area and they couldn't find him. So they went and reported Mitty was last seen walking along the Longtail Road. And so the police, about 300 volunteers and a couple U.S. Army soldiers conducted an extensive search that lasted about 8 days. And the only thing they would find was a rifle cartridge, and that rifle cartridge was the same type that Mitty would use. Many of the locals believed that Mitty was knowledgeable enough to be able to survive, and he would soon resurface in the town. But he never did, and he was never seen again. A year later, on December 1st, 1946, a young 18-year-old college student named Paula Walden went missing on a hiking trip on the same Longtail Road. Now, many people knew about her hiking trip, and many of them saw her head out wearing this bright red jacket, and including an employee that worked at the local daily publisher called the Bennington Banner named Ernest Whitman. Now, Ernest said that he did see her, and he even gave her directions to the Long Trail Road, and he saw her walk off with an elderly couple about 100 yards behind her at that particular time. And there was no concern until Paula failed to show up in class at the Bennington College the next morning. And afterwards, another extensive search will be conducted, including the FBI, more than 1,000 volunteers, aircraft surveillance, and they even posted a $5,000 reward. And the elderly couple was questioned, and they said that they had seen her walking along the long trail, but she seemingly disappeared after she turned the corner. And by the time they got to the same spot, it's just like she vanished. And to this day, evidence of Paula has never been found. Unconfirmed rumors speculated that she had moved to Canada with her new boyfriend, or she just became a recluse in the mountains. But either way, it is a mystery, and she has never been seen since then. On May 5th, 1948, a 26-year-old woman named Betty Frazier was reported missing by her husband, Declan Frazier, who had reportedly grown concerned about his wife's newfound wild behavior. It was as if that she was becoming someone he didn't know. And one day she went off to a local bar, and initially the bartender, Troy Rogers, was implicated in her disappearance after another person who was at the same bar that night claimed that he had given her a ride home after the bar closed down. but a later recreation of the route Tony took home and his given alibi proved that he was innocent. And Betty was last seen by a neighbor who reported her walking unsteadily along Highway 30 in the general direction of Bennington, and it was like she was in a trance. The neighbor said that she asked Betty if she wanted a ride home, but Betty just ignored her and continued to walk aimlessly in the night. Her body was discovered a month later, 17 miles away on the forest trail of Westover. And the case was closed and the cause of death was misadventure. I don't know. Weird. And again, on March 1st, but it is now 1949, a man named James Tedford would disappear. Now, James was a veteran resident at the Bennington Soldiers Home, and he had been out visiting a couple of his family members in another town called St. Albans. And on his way back home, the group accompanied him to the local bus stop, which was the last time that they would see him. Now, according to other witnesses, Tedford was one of 14 passengers on the bus at the last stop before arriving to Bennington. And somehow between the last stop and Bennington, Tedford vanished. Like vanished off the bus. And his things like his luggage was still on the bus and no one had seen him get off the bus. And he didn't get off of the bus in Bennington. And though his disappearance was investigated, still no one reported any suspicious accidents. The only thing that was odd was that he got on the bus, he never got off the bus, but he wasn't on the bus. But nevertheless, James' body was never found. Then on October 12th, 1950, an 8-year-old boy named Paul Jessup went missing. Paul was playing in the back of his mother's pickup truck, and while Paul was doing his thing, being a kid, his mother left him for a brief second just to tend to her pigs, and when she returned, Paul was gone. And after looking for Paul in the immediate area, he was reported missing. And about 100 people assembled for this massive search party. And Paul's father said that he had been talking about visiting the mountains for a couple of days now. And with that information, the police had the tracking dogs pick up Paul's scent and followed it towards the Glattenberry Mountains, but it was soon lost at a nearby crossroad, and they started to suggest that it was possible that Paul was abducted by someone in a motor vehicle. And though the area was searched for several days, no clues or remains of the boy was ever found. And now, this last person disappeared just 16 days after Paul vanished. On October 28th, 1950, a 53-year-old woman named Frida Langer would go missing. She and several of her family members went camping in the woods near the Glattenberry Mountains. And Frida, along with her cousin Herbert, left their family campsite near the Somerset Reservoir to go on a hike. But when they were just a few hundred yards away from the campsite, Frida slipped and fell into a nearby stream, leaving her soaked and wet. So when she got out of there, she just asked her cousin if he could wait for her while she run back to the campsite, get a change of clothes, and come back and catch up with them. And Herbert said yes, and he waited and waited and waited. And when Frida didn't return, he went back to the campsite just to see if everything was all right. And when he got there, he discovered Frida had never returned to the campsite. Instead, it just seemed as if she disappeared in broad daylight in the line of sight. And for the next few weeks, five search parties, including 400 people, police, firefighters, soldiers, and even helicopters. And the search turned up nothing. And then 7 months later, on May 12th, 1951, her body was found in the Somerset Reservoir in the area that was previously extensively searched. And due to the decomposition of her body, no clues of her death could be determined. In this case, like most of the other cases, remained unsolved. And though there were no direct connection to any of these cases except for the location and the time period, some people claim that these disappearances were the workings of a serial killer or a group of killers. And other people say that the Native American folklore or the Native American curse or the paranormal was at place, saying that this particular area was the window to the unexplained. Some will also say that this area is just unstable due to the wind patterns, the terrain, and that is usually chaotic and confusing. And so it's easy for people to get lost. But however you see it, this is enough for me to keep in mind when I'm traveling to and from away by Vermont or whatever. But this is the end of the story and close to the end of the video. So let me know in the comments what your senses are telling you about these strange occurrences, disappearances, Bigfoot. However, you are still here. So please, like I asked in the beginning, like, comment, subscribe if you didn't. But until next time, peace.